Hi, welcome back to the show. We've got plenty of stocks to talk about today. Appreciate all the requests that came through. Keep them coming. Keep the requests coming. I'd like to see more and more people throwing in a couple symbols here and there. I think it'll make for a much more enjoyable show for everybody, looking at symbols that are important to them. For those of you new to the show, I've been providing stock research to institutional money managers for the past 30 years. And just in the last year, I started providing research to individual investors. So I wanted to make sure I brought that up just so you're kind of aware a little bit of my background. Let's go straight into the agenda for today. I got a lot of comments and questions about ADX. People definitely want to hear about ADX, so I want to spend a few minutes going into that. I'm going to go into the basics just to give us all kind of the same starting point and really starting on the same page. And then I'm going to give you a basic premise of low ADX versus high ADX and how I would handle that. And then I'm going to get into a couple criteria that I think are really important, understanding how it can confirm trend strength, and then against a counter trend move, how I would evaluate the ADX. So these are pretty important criteria and stuff that I look at every single day. And I think if you get to understand this, then it'll really help you right away. Like, I think you could start implementing it right away. The other point I want to make is that ADX is way too comprehensive to cover in just the first 5 minutes of a show. So I will continue to talk about this over time in the coming weeks and probably have to do a number of these little segments at the beginning to kind of bring you up to speed with all the things that how I use it. But during the individual stock part, I will be talking a lot about ADX. I always bring it up, so you'll pick up some tidbits from that. And then finally, we are going to go into the stock requests. Again, a lot of good ones came through, so we'll get into that. Before I get into ADX, just wanted to briefly say my research is at rabilstockresearch.com. If you go to the services page, you can sign up for the individual package monthly. And if you plug in StockTalk right now, you get the first 2 months for $50. So you get a discounted rate. It's normally $100 a month. You can see the research that I'm providing over the course of the month, but two times a week you'll get research that is basically providing some individual ideas. I comb through thousands of stocks during the course of a month and identify some of the better looking patterns, at least that I'm finding. So anyway, take a look at that, and let's go ahead and get straight into ADX. Okay, let's get into the ADX. I've got the weekly chart of Cintas CTAS up. So I want to just focus in on this scale with the ADX lines. There's 3 lines here. The green line represents the positive DI, and positive DI means the strength of or weakness of the buyers. So I want you to think when green is moving up, the buyers are showing strength. The red line represents the strength and or weakness of the sellers. So you're getting 2 different representations. One, green is representing the buyers. The red line is representing the sellers. Now, the difference between the two, the calculation isn't exactly that way, but essentially the blue line is showing you the difference between these 2 lines. And so when the lines separate, if green starts to rise like it is here, and the red line is declining, then this blue line is going to rise, and that's going to be based on the buying strength. So the blue line is going up based on buying strength. And then if we look at this, notice where the red line is moving up and the green line is moving down, and we notice the blue line is moving up because there's separation. So the blue line, the ADX line itself, is going to rise whether it's sellers in control or whether buyers are in control. This is sort of this basic premise I want you to understand. When green is going up and red is going down, the blue line is going to go up. If the red is going up and green is going down and there's a separation between the two, then the blue line is still going to go up. It doesn't really care. It's non-directional. It doesn't care whether the buyers are in command or whether the sellers are in command. It's just trying to show you the strength of the trend. So that's essentially what these 3 lines mean. And I just want to make sure you have a clear concept of this. Now, I'm going to go and switch this to a daily chart. So first thing I want you to understand is when ADX is low, when this blue line is low, and preferably when all three lines are low, meaning they're all below this 25 line that I have going across here, then you can sort of look at it like there's no trend strength on this stock, and that I don't want to get chopped up trying to trade something until it emerges out of this low ADX phase. And so what I typically do when we have low ADX is I will draw trend lines on price and I will wait for it to break out. I don't really want to anticipate when we have low ADX. I don't want to buy pullbacks or anything like that. I mean, you can trade inside the range if you want, but the way I'm using ADX is I'm trying to stay out of the chop period and looking for, when I see this low ADX condition in place, I will draw trend lines on the price action and look for a breakout. Now, I'm going to pull up a different stock, MSI. When ADX is strong, like it is here, you can see ADX is well above 25 and green is in command. We've shown a lot of strength in the blue line and a lot of strength in the green DI. That means that there's a lot of strength in the buying. I want to buy pullbacks. I want to look for pullbacks towards my moving average complex. And that's really how I would distinguish between the two. So I'm looking for pullbacks and strong trends using ADX condition that is, preferably above 30. Most of the time I like to see it up at 35 or 40 and then look to buy pullbacks. And then when they have a low ADX condition, I want to wait for a breakout. So that's sort of the basic idea of how I'm looking at the low ADX versus the high ADX. Let me look at, I want to give you a couple examples of how we can make this a little bit more complex. So I've got two time frames here. On the left side, I've got a monthly chart of SEDG, and on the right side, I've got a weekly. And so what I want to do is when a stock is moving up, I want to evaluate the strength of that rally. And I'm looking at the ADX and I want to see the ADX make a move of at least up above 30. I mean, if it can get above 50, that's really powerful. But anything above 30, in my view, I use the 25 line as sort of a barometer, but I really like to see it get at least up to 30 on the rallies. If that happens, I'm interested in buying a pullback. And so I've got one end of the spectrum, I'm looking for strength on a move to the upside. And then when the stock is pulling back, I'm going to go down to the lower time frame, look at the weekly chart. And we're going through a pullback phase here. And so what I want to do is evaluate how strong is that sell-off. So I'm going to evaluate how strong the red line is. How strong is the red DI? And is it creating a powerful move in the ADX to the upside? So again, just to come back and look at this, I've got strength to the upside based on the buyers. And then during the pullback phase, I'm evaluating how strong the sellers are. And in this case, if you notice, the red DI can't even get above 25 during this entire decline. And we're talking about a stock that dropped from almost 400, right around 400 down to 200, got cut in half. And yet red DI can't even get above 25. That tells me the bias is still to the upside. The sellers are not strong enough to really turn the strength of the ADX. And so it's given me a lot of info in terms of how the quality of this selling phase. If the selling phase doesn't have a lot of strength in it, then I know that there's a pretty good chance we're going to probably continue back to the upside. This is the basic premise I want you guys to get an understanding for and understand whether a stock is going up or going down. The ADX is going to be rising. So you have to recognize what is causing the blue line to go up. And if you can understand the difference between those two things, the up moves and the down moves, and mark them, positive peak versus a negative peak, you'll start to get, your timing is going to start to improve. Now, I told you this is way too complex to cover in a 5-minute segment, so I will be covering it more and more over time and as I go through the individual stocks. Let's get straight into some individual stocks, and I will talk about ADX more and more. Let's go ahead and switch stocks. I'm going to go into the list now. These are the requests from everybody. So, looking at this EQIX to start, Still in a pretty decent long-term uptrend. We missed sort of the last opportunity was down closer to the 700 area on a pullback close to the 18-month line. Now you're coming back up against the prior highs. Overall pattern looks pretty good. The momentum conditions look pretty decent. I view it more like a trading play right now, just based on how this has played out. You've come up against the old high here, so maybe not a bad, if you bought it lower, maybe not a bad spot to maybe do a little trimming, but I don't see anything overly bothersome here, and I do like the fact that the ADX on the daily chart is confirming this up move. So I'm willing to kind of stick this out and see if this wants to break out at this point. Certainly a pretty good intermediate term trend and showing some pretty good strength on the daily chart. Let's go to Caterpillar. So Caterpillar made this massive move to the upside and now is going through a corrective pattern. We've broken the 18-week line, and you had pretty good violence to the decline. I mean, look at the size of that bar on the weekly chart off the high. And MACD has rolled down through its signal line. It looks like it wants to go through somewhat of a correction here. 18-week has rolled over. So I would be viewing this as something that long-term is still okay, but intermediate term is probably going to correct and spend, maybe, I don't know, a month or two going through this kind of consolidation phase, digesting the gains that have been made over the course of the past year. AutoZone had a really nice breakout around 1250 or so, had a nice move, and then we had a pullback actually to the 18-week recently, and this is sort of the pattern I just described in the ADX. We had a strong move to the upside and then the pullback, and notice you had a really strong move to the upside confirmed by ADX, and then even though this pulled back to the 18-week, the ADX stayed strong, even well above 30. So that's a good sign. If you're looking to buy pullbacks, that's a really good sign, something to be on the lookout for. And then now we're kind of up against this old high. I mean, I don't think it's as a premium of an entry point right now, but I do think the overall quality of the trend is pretty good. Next target on this is around 1630. So there is some room for this to maybe carry a little bit more to the upside. Advanced Auto Parts, I want to look at this monthly chart. I mean, look at the size. So we had these big swings, but then now this looks like to me is a pretty substantial breakout pattern. What I would like to see is some kind of a consolidation or pullback that lasts a little bit longer than what we've been seeing to really set up the next opportunity from a longer term standpoint, because the 18-month line is way down at 156. We've still got some air between price and the 18-month. The intermediate term trend on the weekly chart looks pretty good. I mean, you had a pullback. This is pretty good trend strength. It's still in an uptrend. And maybe it's going to carry a little bit more right now before we get an extensive correction to show up on the monthly to really set up like the next big buying opportunity. So this would be a stock that I would say I'm okay with holding. I don't know that I'd be interested in buying right now. We kind of missed, again, the last pullback was probably a better opportunity from a timing standpoint. But I don't see anything too dangerous in place. Not a lot of sellers showing up right now. ALB made the big move on the monthly chart, got extended, and look at what's happening on the weekly chart. We've just been working sideways and digesting the gains that were made by working sideways, not going down. We had the down phase, but now we've kind of recovered. And I think we're caught maybe between 150 and 175 right now while we continue to work off sort of the overbought condition. I mean, MACD is still pretty far away from the zero line, so it is possible this will just keep pushing sideways while these two lines, the 18 and the 40, maybe come a little bit closer together. I think once these lines get a little closer together, then that represents the opportunity for this maybe to get going again. I think one of the things I'd be looking for is a move back up through 175, 180, especially with price and volume confirmation, some strength to the upside. That'll probably tell me that this is really getting ready to go again. But again, I'd like to see this maybe last a little bit longer in terms of going sideways. Let's look at CTLT. So we have the strength to the upside on the monthly chart. Look at the confirming ADX. So nice move to the upside. Now we've tried to pull back, and sometimes you don't make it all the way back to the moving average. I mean, we didn't make it back to the 18-month, but notice where 3 different months touch down on the 100 mark. I keep mentioning this. These big round numbers are very important, and they will provide support and resistance in certain cases. So in this case, I think 100 is very important here. If we were to break 100, then you have to assume that this is going to go through a much more extensive corrective process. But the fact that this has moved up, and during the decline phase, during this pullback, we're not seeing any strength in the sellers. Red DI can't even get to 25. So we have low ADX. MACD has gotten pretty close to the 0 line. And on the upside, we showed really good strength. So this is one I'd definitely be watching. I'd probably like to see this pull back a little bit more while the 18-week comes around, and then maybe look for a breakout at 115. But this is getting very close. This is a stock you want to be watching. DHI had a pretty big run and then a reversal point at the 100 mark. Keep these round numbers in mind. So we had the reversal at 100. Now we're threatening to break the 18-week. MACD has crossed down through its signal line, and it just looks a little tired. Notice how on this last big move up, ADX barely got above 25 on the weekly chart. So yeah, it reached kind of the minimum barometer that I'm looking for, but notice how it wasn't quite as strong as that first leg to the upside. So even though the stock made a really good, powerful price move, ADX is sort of saying that it's a little tired. And so that's kind of how I would read this right now. I think we've probably got a little bit more corrective work to do. A lot of support in the low 80s. So we just have to see how this plays out. If this can end up hanging on closer to the 90 area, then maybe this correction ends up being more sideways than down. If it breaks this little area and gets away from the 18-week, then you got to start thinking closer to 80. KBH, same area, another home builder, but I don't like the way this is pulling in. I mean, we had sort of the same pattern to the upside, but nowhere near the price strength. ADX couldn't even get above 25 on the monthly chart. And then even though we made a pretty good move up to 50, ADX never crossed above 25. In fact, Green DI barely made it up and then crossed back down below. So I don't know. This is not as attractive to me for a home builder. I don't think there's enough juice behind this. It's just not, the buying strength isn't good enough. So I probably, now we're at a pretty critical point, or at $40, this 40 area is pretty important. If we don't hold that, then you have to start thinking that, you know, there's some downside risk to it. But it just doesn't appeal to me from a buy side. I think there's other stocks in that home building area that are more attractive. JB Hunt made a pretty good move to the upside. Now we have sort of a similar theme where, you know, the ADX on this was actually pretty decent. We had a pretty good reading up to 35, 40 area, but sort of a spike high, and the reversal has overrun the 18-week. You see how you've broken the 18-week. And when I see that, I'm more of the opinion that this is probably going to take a little bit more time. A lot of good support around 150, but I think this is going to end up forming a range and maybe correcting. Maybe it ends up being more like a sideways correction rather than a downward one, but I wouldn't be in any big hurry to come back and doing any buying in this. I think it's just going to need more time right now. Let's look at FSLR. So FSLR is sort of a combination of two things. If we look at the monthly chart, we have this low ADX condition. Now, you had a little pop in here, but it spent a lot of time underneath. The ADX was low during this period for a couple years, tried to get going, really didn't have any follow through. And then we have another low ADX pattern, and now we've tried to break out. This time you broke out, and when you're pulling back, you're trying to hold this area here and the 18-month line. So this is, I think, pretty constructive overall pattern on the monthly, and we've gotten our pullback to the 18-month line. Now let's look at the decline phase, and if you look at this sell-off, this is a pretty harsh sell-off, 110 down to 70 in a very short period of time, and yet the red line moved up, but it couldn't even get above 25. And then you had a rally, and you came down and tested 70 again, which is pretty big support. And ADX, again, the red line couldn't get above the 25 line. So we have a decline during the decline phase. The ADX is falling, and it's actually low. So strong ADX on the up move, And then during the decline phase, pretty light ADX. So the bias is back to the upside. What I'd probably like to see happen here is that, we've broken the downtrend line. I think I'd like to see a little bit better test of this 18-week now. And then if we start to turn from there, that is really where I think you're getting kind of like a premium opportunity in a stock that is breaking out of a big base, showing pretty good strength from an ADX standpoint, and not showing a lot of selling strength on the decline phase. So a lot of good things going on here. Is another one I would definitely be watching. We're having a gap down today in this. So, it's not necessarily something I want to buy right this second. I want to evaluate how this looks as it comes into the 18-week and cups around. If that happens, this is something to be on the lookout for, because if this gets going, it's probably going to last for a while. I would think that, you're looking at something that could go up for 6 to 12 months, maybe even longer. IQV, I would probably be on the lookout for maybe some opportunity. In fact, I would probably be looking for, I would be looking at this as an opportunity to sort of scale out. We've had a big run. You've gotten extended on the monthly chart. You got a little extended on the weekly chart. We've kind of run up, and ADX really isn't confirming on this last move. We're coming up into some kind of targets areas as well. So if you're in this and you haven't taken profits, I would definitely look to scale it back. If you're looking to buy this, I think we have to look for the next real corrective wave. The daily chart needs to see the 18 cross down below the 40, have really kind of a move of lower highs and lower lows a little bit, and correct back down into, some area of support. It's just too far, I think, right now to be able to be looking to buy this. It's just, unless you're going to trade it on really short-term time frames, you got to be very careful here. O'Reilly had a pretty nice breakout at 500 and then gave us a nice little pullback. So a lot of times you'll get the breakout trade. Let's just look at this. So we have kind of a low ADX condition here. It didn't go sideways for a really extended period of time, but ADX was low for this period. MACD got down pretty close to the zero line. So, you get this breakout to the upside, and then notice what happens. And this happens a lot. We get a pullback phase. First, you start with the low ADX, and then it gets going, and then you get your first pullback towards the 18-week. I'm looking for a move into this. It could be in the zone. It could be just above the 18, in the area. That's really the zone I'm looking for. And if we get this kind of a pullback with strong ADX, it's definitely an attractive opportunity. Now we've kind of pushed away. The next target in this is up at the, above 600, 633-ish, something like that. Probably watch this up around 600, big round number, and see if there's any resistance there. Right now, I would hold this as long as it can hold above the 18-week. So JD is another one I want to spend a few minutes on, because look at the pattern. If we look at that, if you go back and look at the SEDG pattern that I was using as an example, this is very similar. You had a strong up move, got a little spiky up there, again, right around the 100 number, and now we've pulled back to the 18-month. So I'm evaluating this chart and looking at the strength of the ADX. ADX was very strong. It reached a peak of around 50 before pulling back. That's good confirmation of trend strength. Now, we've gotten to the 18-month line, and in the process of doing that, the MACD line has crossed down through its signal line. When I see that, I know I'm not necessarily interested in buying this first pullback, and then you see how you had 1, 2, 3 month pullback, and then this green bar kind of started to move up. When it got to 80, it took out the prior month's high. I'm not as attracted to that when this MACD looks like it's going to cross down like this. And so when I see that, I'm going to be a little bit more patient here. I know I've got the condition in place that tells me I want to watch this, but even though we don't have a lot of selling strength on the decline phase, I'm willing to be a little bit more patient, let this sort of work sideways. We want to keep an eye on this because, again, I'm looking at the strength of the move to the upside. There's probably more upside coming, but this could end up being a more complex corrective pattern, and maybe it just works sideways between 70 and 80 for now in the near term. Also, I want you to recognize something else. Look at the overrun of MACD on the weekly chart. So during this decline, we want to use MACD and ADX together in evaluating the decline. If you get a decline where the MACD holds the 0 line and we have low ADX, that's a really good combination that you can be a little bit more aggressive, especially if red DI can't get above 25. We might have an example of that coming up, but if we get a decline phase where MACD holds 0 and ADX gets low without any real strength in the sellers, then you can be a little bit more aggressive as the stock starts to move higher. But in this case, we have an overrun of MACD and a little bit of strength in the sellers, not a lot, but a little bit, enough to tell me I can probably take a little bit more time. This 80 level is probably pretty important to watch. Let's go back to the next stock, REGN. These patterns happen over and over again. Now, I'm focusing mostly on the monthly and the weekly, but I'm telling you, if you go and start looking for this 2 time frame pattern, strength on the high time frame, pull back to the 18 in any time frame, strength to the upside, and then pull back. And then you go on the lower time frame and evaluate the selling strength. And if it tells you that there's more upside coming, then you can look to play that pattern. So this is the combination. Now, again, I'm looking at it from a monthly and a weekly. This will happen all the time on the on the weekly chart and the daily chart. You can use that combination. What's happened here on REGN, we've already triggered. Now I'd like to see a pullback here. Come back down closer, maybe a little bit closer to 550 or something like that. We're a little stretched away from the 18-week. If this pullback is orderly and on light volume, then I think you can consider being a buyer in this. I like how the overall pattern is working. We've got a big basis of support at 500, and it looks like things are starting to emerge again. ADX never got back above 25 during the decline phase, so we have a lot of strength to the upside and then no real selling strength, and so the bias is still to the upside on this one. MMC. Pretty strong long-term uptrend. Look at the monthly. We've been going up and up and up. Again, this is not early. This is early down here. Even here is not that late, but we've been moving up and moving up and moving up. And now look at how far this is away from the 18-month line. So, and one thing I want to evaluate is we've got a pretty big move to a new high, and ADX is down at 19. This is not the kind of confirmation you want to see. I'm not as interested in buying a pullback in this based on the lack of strength in the ADX on the monthly. So if I want to play on the weekly using the daily, I could probably do that because I do have confirming strength here. The problem I have with that is that we're so far away from the 18-month line. I think there's a little bit of pullback risk in this. So you got to be careful here. I would actually consider maybe trimming this a little if I'm in it. And then I want to look for a little bit more of a complex corrective pattern before I am interested in doing any kind of buying in this. IT, Gartner Group, big strong move to the upside, has created a big air pocket between the 18-month line and the current price area on the monthly chart. And we're sort of running away, making higher highs and higher lows with good trend strength. Again, I'd probably be considering taking some profits here. I don't necessarily, I like to scale out. I don't like to necessarily sell the entire thing. But we're making a pretty big move, and it has sort of jetted away from the moving averages. So not a bad spot to maybe cut this back. And then again, look for a little bit more of a complex corrective pattern before I'd be interested in being a buyer again. Unless you want to go down to a really smaller time frame, you could trade this short term, but you got to be very active, and your timing's got to be very good if you're going to do that. Let me go. I think we've run out of time now, so want to make sure that you guys keep sending in those stock picks. Any symbols that you have, even a 2 or 3, if anything that comes to mind. You can do that in the comment area underneath, or you can send it to stocktalk@stockcharts.com. This is my information to contact me, and have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Hey, Grayson Rose here with StockCharts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, consider giving it a like down below, maybe leave us a comment, and if you're new to the channel, you can subscribe at the link up above. We're gonna bring you daily content from an incredible collection of technical analysts and financial experts.